Those of you who have watched some of my other videos know that I like to talk about cameras you can actually use, but occasionally I will come across a camera which I really like but might not be able to use it because the camera might not be in working order, or there could be another reason, like the film size is redundant and it's difficult to use different types of film. The camera I'm going to talk today is one that I picked up in an auction with some other cameras, and that is this Rolleiflex. Now, Rolleiflex, as you know, is an incredibly good camera. They made cameras from the 1920s, and particularly the twin lens reflex idea. Now, this little model is what we know as a baby Rolleiflex, and a grey baby at that, and they made them from 1957 until about 1963, the grey ones, but they carried on with black ones until about 1968. And to look at them, they are almost identical in appearance to the Rolleiflex Grey or the T, the Rolleiflex itself. But the big difference is obviously it's smaller because it took a film called 127. This is a slide from a 127 film, and this camera I discovered still had a 127 film in here. And 127 was popular for many reasons. It first came in about 1927, and the film size was small enough that you could make smaller cameras. You could just about get a contact print. A contact print is when you put paper against the negative and you get a contact, but obviously it's very small, and the majority, to get a decent sized print, you have to enlarge. There was a good marketing thing about this size, was that it is not too different. The width is about the same as a mount for 35mm slides. So you could use this slide transparency in a 35mm projector. And these were called super slides. And in the late 50s and early 60s, colour was becoming far more affordable. Colour had been expensive a film to use. But by the 60s, you had the Etrichrome film, which was a lovely colour film from Kodak. You had Kodachrome as well. But I don't think Kodachrome, I might be wrong, I don't think they did a 127, but Etrichrome was definitely a film used a lot. And this is an Etrichrome slide. So the film had started in the 20s, 127, but by the late 50s, it was still being promoted and it was being used in smaller cameras. And this, I think Rolleiflex were very much trying to appeal to the slightly wealthier customer who wanted a quality camera but perhaps didn't want the size and bulk of the traditional Rolleiflex, so they were into the baby, and I think it was a very popular camera. It was an expensive camera. I think in dollars it was $130 when it came out in 1957, and had gone down to about $100 in 59. But let's have a look at this camera. Grey, that's the first thing I would notice, and it's fascinating how popular grey is as a colour at the moment. I've got friends who have painted their whole houses grey. And it is a colour which was very fashionable. My mum had a sofa which was grey in the 50s. Grey was in colour, so this was a cool colour. We have a good range of shutter speeds. The shutter speeds, I think, are up to 500 on here. We've got this slightly odd, there was always this coupling with the shutter speed and the aperture. The aperture on this camera is, the maximum is 3.5. The maximum shutter speed is 1/500th of a second. And obviously you would load the film manually. There's no you would load the film manually from here to over here. I presume it had a start signal, which we would line up, I would have thought, there. Because as you wind on, it sets the shutter. Nice little feature I find on here is when the viewing cap is down, it's locked. You can't take a photo with the viewing cap. So if you pick one of these up and you think it's not working, just open it up and you will find it works. When you wind on, the shutter is set, and you had a counter on this side here. Focusing to use, you would obviously look through what we call the race finder, and you would focus accordingly. And it's a nice bright viewfinder. And you would simply wind on here, a knob rewind, not a crank, and focusing here. It seems to be the normal bayonet here for filters. And as I said, I would love to use this camera, but her 127 film was discontinued a few years ago, and there's one or two places you can still buy it, but I did look it up and it was about £15 for a film. So for the moment, I'll have to admire it as an ornament, but it would be nice to put a film in. As I said, it produced the super slide. I think the downfall of this camera was the film size, because it was at a time, if you think of it, this was launched in 57 and was still being made in the mid-60s, but in 63 Kodak bought out 126 film, and 126 film Instamatic you could just load into a film, just slot it in. And these cameras were, I think, as I said before, aimed at people who had the money to buy a serious camera but wanted a smaller camera and an easier camera to use. And it's fascinating that Rolleiflex did make a quality single lens reflex 126 camera. So I think the downfall of this camera wasn't the camera itself, but the convenience of the film and the fact that 126 came in and was just so much easier to use. These are nice cameras. They appear on eBay for around £80 to £100. But as I said, the problem with them is getting 127 film. Thank you for watching. Bye.